Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Sam Stein. I'm the head of marketing at Aris Global, and we are really excited to introduce today's panel. The panel is focused on a topic of really great interest right now within regulatory affairs, and that is the acceleration of digital transformation. We are very happy to be joined by a phenomenal group of leading voices from across regulatory affairs. And now I'm going to turn it over to them and actually let them introduce themselves. So we'll start with Fritz.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. My name is Fritz Tilp. I'm the Managing Director of Hyperion Life Sciences Consultancy. I'm heavily involved with a lot of the IDMP efforts on both the industry and on the regulator side. And very happy to be joining this session to discuss this important topic.
Great, thanks, Fritz. And I'll send it over to Carrie.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Smithson. I'm a director in life science transformation for Grant Thornton. And I've been working in life sciences for about 25 years, helping companies streamline their regulatory, clinical, and quality document and information management processes while enabling compliance. And I'm also involved in the Drug Information Association, Regulatory Information Management Reference Model team, and lead the artificial intelligence topic.
Great to have you, Carrie. Over to you, Steve.
Hello, everybody. This is Steve Gens, managing partner of Gens and Associates. Looking forward to the session today. Just a brief background: about 30 years experience in life sciences, starting in industry with Johnson & Johnson, and then going into consultancy and opening up the firm 15 years ago. So we're a niche provider and life sciences, have a big focus on regulatory, and lots of folks know us with our annual benchmarks.
Great, thanks, Steve. Over to you, Wim.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon or good evening, everybody. My name is Wim Siepers. I'm with Aris Global for 25 years. Been involved in different aspects of our suite, primarily in regulatory, and since the beginning of the year, I'm leading our strategy innovation around LifeSphere.
Wonderful. Thanks, Wim. Okay, so without further ado, I want to now hand it over to Fritz, who's going to kick us off with the first area of questions and topic. So over to you, Fritz.
Thank you, Sam. So we're talking about digital transformation. And I think one of the things that we know within regulatory affairs is that we like the word digital. We associate it a lot to documents because they're very digital, but there's more to digital than documents. And one of the key topics there is that there is a thing called data. And perhaps we should even consider how some industries have even made more steps in that area than we have so far. And this is starting to play a bigger role in our environment more and more. Now, we often look at our regulators to be our innovators, and that is regularly a challenge because they have a different remit. But we also realize that within our company, there are lots of reasons to be looking at data. Of course, analytics by themselves are like really interesting to work with. And I think many companies in industry enjoy this. But let's also be honest, from a regulatory affairs point of view, we still usually have a limited set of metrics and analytics that we use. And it's here where we're focusing on, it's here where we think the digital transformation can really build upon using data much more. Now, looking at all the fancy things we could do with data, looking at the trends, looking at how we could maybe automate things are really interesting parts, but I'm going to start at the fundamentals because maybe that's more me. And that means that what do we need to do to reap the benefits that we're talking about? And I would almost say I have 4 like really boring topics on my slide here that force us to face the typical challenges that we need to overcome before we can play with the real good toys. And the typical things that play a role there is responsibility for data quality. And putting that in the line organization, I don't think is something new, but really appreciating it, maybe even rewarding it, maybe even giving a bonus out for making sure that that data from regulatory event to posted to registered information in a system and possibly even acknowledged by a regulator is something that I'm willing to reward you for. It's not just product introduction into the market, it's actually keeping our data up to date and allowing us to build on that. That often includes in our industry quality control, within the line. So again, we make sure that our data is correct. Perhaps sometimes we can still learn something there from clinical, where of course data entry or even double data entry or even automated checks on that data based on data clarification protocols would make a lot of sense. But that's an important part if you really want to ensure processes can run. And if you do run into a theme as a problem, because a certain area of data is just not as reliable as you would like it to be, you might start an improvement program. Now, it might sound a little bit almost embarrassing if you have to do an improvement program, but I would say the exact opposite. There are great opportunities to really tackle theme by theme what needs to be handled and to upgrade the level that you have. I would always advise to address it in the order of priority of either the use cases that you're supporting or perhaps even the expectations of stakeholders, could include regulators, but it's a good opportunity to deal with it. I think what Steve will share later will give us very interesting insights into the typical area where the data is being used a lot, where initiatives are, which could actually help you make your decisions on prioritizing your improvement programs. Finally, the regulator is moving in this direction as well, and we're looking at more optimized processes, if I can say it that diplomatically. We might be using data more in handling certain variations. We might be managing our shortages in a different way. We might be doing this for compliance reasons. We might be doing it to look at globally harmonized information, possibly even supporting pandemics in the future, hopefully in near future. But it also means that you need to have those standards under control. And that means that within your organization, data standards management is actually an important topic. Looking at the controlled vocabularies and the different systems that play a role, and making sure that you can really find those values back in all the places where it needs to be. And that's not just systems, that's actually also your documentation. And that's actually where quality control comes back, because you shouldn't just do quality control on the data itself, but finding that relation back to the contents of your ECTD or your SMPC or anything like that is an essential part in that. Now, we've put these 4 points on this slide because we think it gives room for an interesting conversation. And I think I'd like to open the floor by putting it there.
Yeah. Thank you. Just one thing I wanted to emphasize on what you mentioned is related to documents. Of course, the drive towards data is important. As you also mentioned, regulators are moving in that direction. And with XCV, NPD, and IDMP, we've definitely seen that happening. And I think it's a very, very exciting evolution to move from documents to data. But I also believe that in an initiative like this, also when you're talking about improving your data, quality data, that you can't forget about the documents that you already have. Both from a historical perspective, there's a lot of data in there. There's a lot of information in there. And you also have to make sure that over time, when you build up that data repository, that there is a clear alignment between the data that you have in the documents and the data that you have in your database. So I think it's that alignment, and I think documents can definitely also help you there from a historical perspective. And also on a personal, I think from a future perspective, I don't think documents will disappear anytime soon. It's a very document-driven approach in the past, and I think that will stay for a few years. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that documents will play an important role also into that whole data initiative that you might have ongoing in your organization.
Yeah, I fully agree, Wim. And just to react to your first point, I think with the regulators, we are trying to find the optimal use cases to make this all work. And then I think it will determine a lot what we choose for. If we choose for an optimal assessment process on both variations and new introductions, then I will also think that a lot of the focus of getting the data correct will be on those products, which makes sense because that's where you will get the value. But yeah, of course, topics like pharmacovigilance across the board also look at data like that. So that's where addressing the legacy documentation and data makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Wim. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in. I know, Fritz, this is a topic our teams have done a lot of discussing this year and kind of summarizing data quality as a bedrock, with everything that we do. The thing that comes up for me on this, and certainly we could talk about this just for a half hour, but we're putting a lot of focus because a lot of our clients are struggling with what we call data quality sustainability. Sometimes you treat it as a project. You have the new system. You do your data quality audits. You do your remediation. You flip the switch on Monday. You come in and you're just ready to go. But it's the sustainability or institutionalizing this new governance that gets people hung up. We tend to encourage to think about it in a couple of ways, that you have data management and then data strategy. So data management is the classic, the stewards having those dedicated roles, post implementation, with very clear data quality checks, because as we know, it's all about the data. And then who owns the data, who's responsible for the data. And a lot of that, as we know, depends upon the model. So if we would pick on, say, the registration and product information data, how much of it's going to be doing centrally, how much will it be done at the local affiliate. And the other thing we're starting to see, and it's actually really exciting, in the category of data strategy. So you see some roles like data scientist, chief data officer. So it's really formalizing governance, not only in regulatory, but across the enterprise, because as we know, the next evolution of RIM, and it's already happening with our top performers in our studies, is connecting RIM up to the enterprise. So it's that information throughput. And certainly, Fritz, on the topic near and dear to your heart, IDMP SPOR, it's just a base requirement that those, kind of pipes, if you will, those information pipes are laid, and the quality going through those pipes is really good. So just a few thoughts, and I definitely echo your point about, tying data quality to rewards and recognition systems. That's really a cultural statement of quality. So back to you.
Yeah, I fully agree, Steve. Thank you very much. I think we could talk for hours about this topic, and we've spoken before about the way that, for example, financial departments do this with a data month-end closing. I'm really hoping that at some point we're going to see that development as well. Carrie, any additions?
Yeah, if I could just add a couple things. I think it's key, I agree with everything that everyone said, and I think it's key that as you start your improvement programs that you define what it means to have good quality data, and identify the metrics and data that you need so that you can ensure that you're getting that and pulling that together as you set up your future state processes. And then also, seek to leverage some of the reference models that are out there already. Especially if you're a smaller mid-tier company, you probably need the same data that everyone else does, or at least a subset. And that's just a quick way of getting started with your data model and establishing your own internal standards. And then whether it's internal standards that you're trying to set up, or if they're regulatory standards, what you can do is compare your data and documents against these standards so that you can move towards compliance. And that's just an easy way to get going with your projects. Thanks, Fritz.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I'd like to hand it over to you, Carrie, right?
Yeah. Okay. So the next topic that we wanted to share with you was regulatory intelligence. And one thing that we're seeing is, regulatory intelligence, as you know, is the building block to supporting the regulatory product life cycle, and it can include any information, knowledge, experience that informs regulatory strategy, the policies, submission authoring, and so on. And as companies have been implementing RIM solutions and have more data available to them, they're seeking to enhance their regulatory intelligence capabilities to get more value out of the internal and external data. And modern technology can help them take that to the next level. The first step to improving regulatory intelligence is to have the information that you need available and of reliable quality, just like we were mentioning. And without that, you won't be able to adequately inform your product regulatory strategy, submission policies, and so on. Second, we see a shift away from merely gathering intelligence and issuing newsletters, which can get lost in email, towards more actionable intelligence, where the intelligence is used to develop action plans for updating product filing decisions, submission contents, templates, and so on. As part of this, companies are investigating or implementing tools to mine internal and external information sources, including insights from health authority interactions, to synthesize more information to feed into their decision-making, and using business rules engines to notify their experts and decision makers of key insights that could affect their regulatory activities. So just wanted to see what everyone else would like to share about what you're seeing in this area.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, my opinion on that is essentially, this is definitely an area where more and more people are getting interested in and starting to put attention in the regulatory space. And but I'd like to put on my technology hat here a little bit and really elaborate a little bit on the artificial intelligence. You mentioned a lot of things like data is lost in emails or embedded in emails, external and internal data. And I think really here that nowadays that artificial intelligence and a lot of the capabilities that fall under that definition can actually add very much value to building up your regulatory intelligence database. You're of course looking at internal data, as you mentioned, is around data mining your own data, your own emails necessarily, and seeing trends around that, seeing how those could be translated into actionable insight within your systems, within your organization. Also on external elements around where AI capabilities can look at regulations that are published, extract trends from that, extract information from that. Also with respect, and even today, multilingual publications or multilingual regulations is not an issue for artificial intelligence anymore. So I think also where in the past, so what I'm trying to get at is essentially in the past, we've seen that it's been a big hurdle has been, how do we collect all that data? Yeah? Yes, it's valuable, but how do we collect it? And a lot of manpower would go into it, but now with artificial intelligence and being able to do data mining, looking at NLP and so on, I think it's becoming much easier to actually gather that information and make it actually actionable within your organization.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just easier to be able to pull everything together, and you can cover more content than when you had people that were just sitting there reading it all themselves and trying to synthesize. Anyone else have something to add?
Yeah, a few thoughts here. You know, we've been tracking RegIntel through our benchmarks for quite some time, and sometimes they're kind of, a higher degree of investment, and other years it's lower, and it's definitely back in a higher level. And we really believe, this capability is at a tipping point. It's interesting because in 2018 survey, it was predominantly the large multinationals that were investing in this, and everybody knows the story of kind of RegIntel from a system standpoint. We have a bunch of our customized SharePoints. We have spreadsheets around the world with those country filing requirements. In regulatory, we do love our spreadsheets, but that's starting to change as far as companies, all size companies, doing more investment. More of the providers are doing investments, and some of the experimentation with advanced technology. Wim gave a really nice overview from that. But the other thing we're starting to see is, as we have our COVID-19 regulatory impact pulse survey open right now, is the push or the acceleration of certain things like health authority interactions. Certainly Fritz could talk about this quite a bit. Some of the health authorities around the world that are a little behind on electronic submissions, the dispatch of physical media, during a pandemic. So some of those areas and all the regulatory requirements, the guidance changes, is, we believe, really accelerating the priority of making updates or investments in the regulatory intelligence. The other factor we believe is really pushing this, and it's really good news, is adopting true global RIM programs. So we see regulatory intelligence as one of 15 capabilities, but the survey this year, about 30% of companies have achieved a global, RIM program. And when we look at top performers, it's 90%. So when you look at things globally, there's certain areas, especially regulatory intelligence, they get a big priority. And it's interesting on your last point there, Carrie, because on our we'll see a slide in a moment. The number one use case, that most people are working on is what you have, in the third point there, the managing or the mining of those health authority Q&A responses. So I find that interesting. So Fritz?
Yeah, if I can build on that, Steve, with the same hobby horse that we started in the first topic, is relation between regulatory intelligence and data. I'm still really intrigued where we can make automation based on that data. I think many of us run into situations where critical senior management of a company or even of a regulator asks us, why do we need to make this change into this data world? Why do you make it sound so sexy and so fantastic? I don't see the fruits that I'm going to see. And actually, I think this is, again, one that could work by showing the automation possibilities, the analytics possibilities that you'll get from that. So my interest is very much on, is the regulatory intelligence available? Will it be available in such a way that we can give data instead of fuzzy information, so that we could actually automate some algorithms on it? Any views, Carrie?
Oh, I think that completely makes sense. It's definitely, there's a lot to be done here. So I think we'll turn it over to Steve for the next topic.
Yeah, so automation, hype versus reality. This is a good one. And I know in the last DIA show, there's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of conversation about AI, robotics, all the new advanced stuff. But there's also a lot of technologies that are being used that are not so new, but they're being used more frequently in regulatory. So what we thought we could do, it's my style, as you know, we have some benchmark slides. So let's take a look at some of them, and then we're going to open this up and get others' view about automation. So some of these slides are really busy, so let's just kind of get the simple point here on this. The study that we did was 66 companies, but what we found really interesting, if we look at our top performers, those that ended up in our strong performance band, or we actually had 2 companies in world class, which was really, really exciting. But let's just focus on the graph here, and the kind of the dark green teal, implement or production, or investigating, meaning it's in production or it's very active. Investigating, maybe there's a proof of concept going, engaging the provider community. And I just circled the ones in red. So with our top performers, those are companies that have modernized their global RIM program, and they're working on the advanced stuff, like things like this, connecting to other functional areas. So you can see out of the big debate about AI robotics that there's a lot more movement on the robotics, process automation, a big focus on data lakes. And we go back to that initial discussion that Fritz started off with. It's all about data quality. So if you have 3 or 4 areas, and especially the classic areas to support IDMP SPOR, or eventually, Unimed for device companies, that data quality, in a data lake, it has to be from all sources. And there's also a lot of automation as far as data extraction with metadata. So this kind of gives you a sense with our most advanced companies, what are they working on? And then the rest of the graph in the yellow is just good old-fashioned monitoring. We're staying up to date, educating. So that's what we try to accomplish here, what's active and then what's passive. So on the next slide, we get into some of the use cases. So, and just highlighting 4 of these here. The color coding's about the same on the graph. That in the dark green teal, actively investigating the use case. In the blue, we are secured funding, going to start this year in 2020, or in the light green, we'll investigate within the next 2 years. So if you add those 3 colors up, that's what the red circles are. So as I had mentioned just a few moments ago with Carrie's segment, the health authority response, data mining of it, it's the number 1. Automated data document quality checks, in the past this has been very people intensive, and that's starting to get automated. And a lot of expressions about, automating metadata, population. And it could be some of the things about ripping off some data, getting into Fritz points about more structured data on documents where it's a lot easier to rip off, say from an approval letter, and it updates the registration system and the person just has to verify instead of enter. And so there's a lot of different expressions. But again, with our top performers, those are the 4 areas, and we can think about it where they see the most value, where they're spending their time in their investments. And the last slide before we kick it off gives you a view, again, from our top performers, because it's very different from everybody else. They're a lot further along about, RIM being connected to the enterprise. So if we just focused, again, on the dark green teal, have the connection today. You see the number 1 connection with top performers is Safety PB. We have the connection with the product change control. Label artwork management is a big one. And the thing on the far right-hand side that's on deck for the next couple of years, we keep on coming back to that data lake concept. So more and more companies are connecting it up. So we go with our first topic, the data quality has to be there. Our second topic on Reg and Tell, when you have more global adoption and more connectivity, it starts getting really, really interesting on the Reg Tell. So if we go to our landing page here, slide, a few things that we'd love to explore. And I think, Fritz, we'll start with you. In your view, as far as practical automation, I mean, what are you hearing? What are you seeing in the next couple of years? And anything that you think is just hype? I'm probably more interested on what people are practically, trying to achieve. So what are you saying, Fritz?
You know what kind of a pragmatic person I am, so I'm not so much into the hypes now. But what I think is really interesting is to see that if you really look at bringing medicines to patients, which I think was eventually why we were all doing this, it really takes full circle to do that. It sort of takes two to tango. And it's interesting to see the interactions of data being shared amongst different silos in the companies, and I think it's highly needed to get that consistency. But there is, of course, the other partner that we play with, which is that regulator, to get eventually our product in the right shape and format to the patient, and perhaps even to produce that electronic product information to get to the patient. So I would, and I realize, of course, that there are quite a few steps that we need to take in the, for example, IDMP and SPOR arena. Although we see lots of progress, there's still a lot to be done to get all our regulators on a similar page and start really getting the benefits from it. But looking at use cases like that, where variation management, where writing some of our labels or even checking some of those labels or even providing the information in such a different format than we do now, that we can throw it on apps and different shapes for different readers of that product information, I think would be great examples of seeing how that data can be used. And I'm also expecting that, especially in the data quality part, that's where still a lot of the automation can have a lot of effect and perhaps even also find interesting trends. So those are my 2 cents, Steve.
Okay, thanks. Really, really great points, Fritz. Carrie, what are you seeing out there with I know you work with a lot of clients, both on the medicinal and the device side. So what are you saying?
Sure. Well, I'm seeing a bit of healthy skepticism, but those that are progressing forward, I expect to see, continued use of, robotic process automation to automate some of the repetitive manual tasks. As you were saying, the data extraction, metadata population, which nobody wants to do when they're, filing a document, as well as, when companies have, mergers and acquisitions, getting those documents in from the acquired company and the data in and automatically filing them, and then somebody just has to review. So that saves a lot of work there. Also, continued use and expanded use of like low code business process management or workflow tools to help automate those touch points between regulatory and other areas, whether that be safety or around the CMC change controls and with quality and manufacturing. So I think there'll be some expanded use there to tighten up the integrations with some of the other areas, and a little bit more natural language processing, content mining, whether it's in regulatory intelligence or other areas there for data extraction. Some of the hype, I mean, I know there is a lot of hype around it, but I think in some areas you might want to wait, like natural language generation and such, until the technology evolves a little bit. It may not handle some of the complexities within regulatory and a lot of if this then that. Sometimes you might need to string together more than one AI or intelligent automation type technology to get the results that you need. Or it just might take too much training to be really worth it. And maybe you could just, have a human look at it and get it done quicker. So there are some situations where you might want to, evaluate whether it'll really add value. But I think there's a lot of good use cases out there that we can move forward with.
Yeah, and just, a couple of comments on what you're saying. What we're seeing through the survey data, a lot of the large multinationals that are, progressing, and they have a lot more complexity. There's a lot more experimentation, but, next year and in 2022, when we look at mid-tier and smaller companies, they're really upping, kind of their experimentation with some of the things that you just talked about. So really interesting. Wem, so batting cleanup here, a lot of solution providers, have transactional systems. Certainly you guys have been doing great on the registration safety, but in this new era of applying a lot of technologies, you've already talked about some. Where are you at with this, and where is Aris Global going?
Yeah, and I think automation is really an important aspect of our strategy also going forward. I mean, a lot of seeing how you can increase efficiencies within your processes and how you can actually make more of your data in an intelligent way also. But I'd like to answer the question also about whether it's hype or reality from a technology point of view. And Carrie already mentioned it somewhat. Is the technology is there. It might not always be 100% up to speed yet according to your processes, but a lot of this technology is already used in other industries. Yeah, the regulatory industry is a little bit more complex than other industries, so it might not be able to adopt it as easily as in others. But I think for me, the problem is really more a matter of adoption rather than asking the question, is it a hype or is it there? Right? It is there, and we have to, in an intelligent way, see how can we adopt it. At the same time, and you also refer to that, I think you need to be realistic on how you adopt it. You cannot just take everything and try to automate everything at once. You have to take it stepwise, and we have to see, okay, how can specific technology like NLP, like structured content authoring, for instance, how can that actually help in my business processes? And also not do it all at once. Gradually build it, get familiar with it, and then actually moving your business process in the right direction. But again, the answer is really, it's technically speaking, it's reality. It's just a matter of how do you best adopt it within your own organization, and then how can you make it beneficial for you?
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Wem. And I would hope in 3, 4, 5 years from now, a lot of these where kind of cutting edge or just kind of base technologies and capabilities. So really good exploration on this. So Sam, back to you.
Yeah, I think overall a great discussion. And actually that brings us to the end of our time today. So I just want to give a very sincere thank you to all of our panelists, to Fritz, Wim, Carrie, and Steve for spending time with us today. I think it was a great discussion and very much appreciated. And as always, a big thank you as well to our attendees for watching. Have a good day, everybody. Thanks.